I get quite a lot of people sending me measurements they've made, acoustic measurements in their room, from sweeps or MLSs or pink noises or something, for me to have a look at and see what's going on. And I thought maybe to help some of them make better measurements, we'd go through some of the common things that you need to understand to get a good measurement out of a piece of software. And so if we have a look here, this is typical of an impulse response that I'd get. Maybe there'd be some reflections that you can see in the tail of the impulse response. You zoom in a little bit, you can certainly see those reflections. Doesn't matter what they are for now, we can go into that another time. That's the start of the impulse response. Now what's interesting is the software generates it, you see the impulse response and the spectrum above, but to get from the impulse to the spectrum, where we can see these, lovely features in the frequency domain, it has to use a thing called a window. And the window selects which part of the impulse response it's going to use to generate the spectrum, because it can't use absolutely everything. There's a lot of reasons for not doing that we'll go into later. And the red line that's moving now is the window that had been automatically placed, that had taken up the entire sample. But that's probably a bit too long for most purposes. And as you can see, when we move that window, we can do things like remove reflections, but that actually has an effect on our frequency response. And again, the purpose here is just to demonstrate that there is such a thing as a window and we should be conscious of it. Shortening the window even further, clearly now having effect on the low frequency resolution, adding some ripples into the frequency response, and even moving the window. So the same size window, but where we position it will affect our frequency response. Obviously moving it to the wrong location, missing the impulse response altogether, gives us a useless result unless perhaps we want to investigate the reflection only. So the point to begin with is that there's this thing called a window that we have to know how to set. Windows have different types, lengths, all sorts of different types of windowing that we need to understand before we can be sure that what we're looking at in the spectrum is worth looking at. Now I'm going to cover lots of those different things later on, and more about how we can use the information in the impulse response to help us understand our room acoustics. So if you have any questions or feedback, they would help me generate what the next little video might be.